I occasionally frequented the Theosophical Society in the city, enjoying light lunches in the canteen and meeting interesting people. One day I happened to talk to a group of young people about astronomy, space travel, and extraterrestrials visiting Earth. A young gentleman with long copper-colored hair asked me if I could guess his name. I was surprised by this, hoping that his interest was nothing more than curiosity or eccentricity. I looked at him and asked why he felt like testing me, and he answered saying that he sensed something different about me, particularly when talking about intergalactic visitors. "Tell me what my name is," he asked again. I told him that his name started with the letter R, and it sounded like Ross or Rossiter, but I was unsure. He looked at me, his face turned white, and said that he was not wrong when he first thought I was different. Then he added, "My name is Ross." I was certainly very surprised. I guess it was a form of thought transference, although I was unsure about the validity of it. In reality, from my childhood, I was very sensitive about people around me, able to sense their intentions, their lingual backgrounds, and even at times their name and occupation. It felt almost as if the keepers of knowledge were assisting me. I often greeted people in their mother tongue, surprising them immensely, as I still do. But I did not do much name-guessing. This was different. At the time, Ross was not employed and lived with his elder brother, who did not believe in anything, and his father lived somewhere near Frankston. We started meeting at the Theosophical Society from time to time. He was friendly with other people of mature age, and a few spoke of him as if he was the return of Jesus with his looks. He was interested in esoteric sciences, electronics, and space travel. Soon we began meeting in the city over a meal or just window shopping, and later I visited him at his brother's and met his father. He introduced his other friends, Michael, Rick, and David, who were all modernists. Michael was an industrial chemist and had a very young girlfriend. David was into health foods and music. Rick worked for a phone company and was into building his own synthesizer. Michael had also built his own keyboard and was keenly interested in playing Scottish, Irish, and Australian tunes. He lived with his girlfriend in South Yarra in an old two-story Victorian house where occasionally television programmers filmed some of the soapies. Ross, with David and a few other friends, were practicing music in their garage. I joined in, offering my compositions and occasionally singing during the practices. Later I met their female singer. At one stage we performed Jesus Christ Superstar at various venues, and sometimes even in one of the churches. We called the group by a variety of names at first, but I suggested calling it Scarlet Hills. Ross was keen, playing drums and riding motorcycles, just like me. One Sunday afternoon, when riding together for the fun of it, we dropped in at a meeting place of other bikers for refreshments. However, while waiting, someone from the crowd hit me right in my back with his elbow for some unknown reason, and it really hurt. I was shocked. I thought someone had shot at me, but I could not see who it was trying to hurt me. Luckily, the pain and shock did not last long, and we left to keep going and enjoy our outing. It was very strange, and I still ask why such treatment was necessary. Maybe it was due to racial hatred, or a case of mistaken identity on the part of that unfortunate person who hit me without showing his face. Maybe it was their kind of fun, hurting a stranger, but it did not deter us from having many enjoyable rides. Ross was intrigued with the Victorian spiritualists in Beckett Street. Occasionally, I started going there with him, making new friends. Magda never approved of my going out and spending time with my other friends, and yet she hardly spent any time with me, instead spending long hours with her faithful kin, like an obedient puppy. What could I do other than go out and make new friends? I literally had no home, no family, and no wife anymore. My home became like a prison in a foreign land, even a cold and bleak graveyard. I was only going home to sleep, and occasionally dine on my own, as Magda and the children under her supervision were not greeting me any longer. But I was still providing her with whatever income I generated. I could do naught else other than just wait for the inevitable dissolution of the marriage and lose everything. However, I was going to remain patient to the end. Alas, that end was in an unknown state I was extremely worried about, although I had been told by a number of older people that men don't cry and don't feel any pain. How could anyone deal with the emotional pain? Perhaps my knowledge of psychology would be of some help. Or would it? At one point, I went to a VSU afternoon service, and Ross also came along. I felt so happy for becoming a completely rebellious man against my control freak wife's Jehovah's Witness absurdity. Perhaps due to me being a newcomer, the female demonstrator chose to speak to me directly, telling me, allegedly under psychic inspiration, words I could never believe and also never forget. "My friend, there is a very important-looking gentleman standing here with me, urging me to tell you something you may not like, but he is urging me to tell you nevertheless. He seems to be a Greek Orthodox priest, and I believe he is your guardian, and is saying that you are going to experience a separation and divorce from your family." I immediately responded, "I suppose I cannot help it any more, as it is expected." Upon this, she added, "But strangely you are not even stirred. It is most unusual." I said, "But what can I do if my partner wishes to break away? If that is what she is going to do, she will do just that. If she had truly loved me and her family in the first place, she would not listen to others with their cultist viewpoints for guidance." I was utterly surprised, and yet, being highly critical by nature, I contemplated that probably somebody who knew me had spoken about this issue previously to the psychic lady. But Jehovah's Witnesses would under no circumstances talk to spiritualists whom they consider as devil worshippers, and certainly I had never spoken about myself or my circumstances to anybody at that time. I remained a very private person, as I still am. On the other hand, I was visiting them for the very first time that afternoon, and nobody there knew me. Ross could not have told anything to anybody at that stage, for we had never spoken anything about my circumstances. Although my mother was cognizant with spiritual matters, and has been reading coffee grounds and tea leaves for fun, like my other relatives, and taken me to so-called soothsayers. I personally never took them very seriously. In fact, I never considered them as genuine. But this one at the VSU was different. I wondered about it, asking how she knew all about my family breakdown. There had to be something to it, and I was sure that one day I would discover that too. Ross came to meet me once at our place, and seeing him at the door, Magda spoke to me indirectly that I was befriended with other Satan worshippers, and told the children that she never wanted to see these kind of characters, especially those who looked like the Native Americans at our home. I only hoped that Ross did not hear her. Before I started my employment with the state government at Melbourne Town Hall, I worked for the Collingwood Council, dealing with mothercraft, ethnic liaison, and health issues in the area. What I was involved in was similar to the 7 Combined Schools project. Before everything went out of hand, Magda had been telling me how tired she was, and perhaps, as her brothers suggested, she should take time and have a little holiday without the children, and she vehemently decided to fly over to Hobart and stay with the Kudoviks, or Strobachs, for a few days, leaving me to look after the children. I accepted the proposal gladly, for perhaps she would calm down when she returned, and we could still save the family's sinking boat, as per her terminology. I certainly had many chances to have different girlfriends, but it was not my interest, although I met a number of friendly ladies. Some were students, others were employed in jobs like the nursing profession, or even modeling. It was always more interesting talking to them, but my interest remained frozen there, as I did not want to hurt Magda. But when things became absolutely hopeless, my need to have companionship in the outside world became vitally important, as I was still a young man in need to be loved and valued, similarly needing to love someone. Living in a loveless family is extremely detrimental for any human being. There were times when just talking to a girl was helpful to get me out of morbid thought patterns, such as removing myself altogether from the face of the earth. After having lots of severe argumentations with Magda, I preferred to take long walks, ending up in the city for cups of coffee and talking to other humans, because at my supposed home I was not seen as a human being any longer. However, I did not fancy what some other humans were engaged in, such as smoking heavily or drinking to forget their problems, instead preferring to walk in the fresh air and have cups of hot drinks. If I could stay home, I would either play a few of my favorite pieces on the keyboard or listen to music for many hours, but it was not allowed. With Magda's state of mind and keeping the children away from me, I would have no choice other than sit in a lonesome corner, close my eyes, and concentrate on my problems silently, with tears rolling down my cheeks, which she would either never see or completely ignore. Unfortunately, as Gail Poole puts it, even with the best of maps and instruments, we can never fully chart our journeys. Going back in time, I remember how unwilling Magda was to let the children go out anywhere in case I attempted to take them to worldly places where they could be subjected to evil activities, such as birthday parties, or to the cinema to watch lots of lies, such as science fiction films depicting killing and bloodshed, and worst of all, they may portray black art. What if I took them to places where people allegedly worshipped the devil, as Magda believed, such as the Theosophical Society or spiritualists. Just imagine. Remember, she has never been to those places. I knew for sure that she used to instruct the children to tell her where they were taken in full detail on their return, and Annette often told her mother, whispering, "I will, I promise." I could hear clearly, although pretending I had not. Was it a genuine promise or a lie to appease her? Indeed, I occasionally took them to other friends' places, when, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses allowed my children to come out with me, under the dark shadow of Magda's complete control, to meet children from different races and nationalities, for I knew they could learn so much from such encounters. However, because those children were not of Jehovah's Witness background, they could only be classified as evil or worldly, according to my wife. Almost all Jehovah's Witness parents teach their children to hate the world and try everything possible to keep them with only those of their kind. Sadly, children growing up in such an atmosphere become excessively discriminative. I observed how Magda used to literally force them to tell her everything they did and learned at school when they started their prep and primary education. At times, I have seen them bitterly cry, being punished for allegedly not telling the truth. According to Magda, they had to be disciplined now, before it was too late. That meant forever being interrogated and regularly physically punished to give them a direction in life. In other words, the children were not allowed to be children. They were forced only to please Jehovah God, always forced to utter silent prayers before every meal, and sometimes subjected to abuse, like being sent to bed without food, because they did not pray. If they laughed at something they found funny, wooden spoons had to be broken on their buttocks, subjected to their mother's beatings. A godly discipline like that was apparently vital to save their lives when the world ended. As time went by, Magda strictly chose never to accept or believe in me, as she discovered that I was not interested in what she believed as the only truth. Alas, we had a third child I loved so dearly, for he was somehow different compared with the other two. This did not mean I loved the others less. However, they were really their mother's sweethearts, following her every dictate and keeping away from me as often as they could. Maybe they did not want to be punished if they wanted to spend a little time with their father. Right in the beginning, as you will remember, Magda's parents used to snatch Annette from my arms as soon as they noticed me holding the child, feeding or cleaning her, while Magda was doing other chores. Even then, the grandparents were alienating the child against me, knowingly or unknowingly. After the second child was born, Magda continued with the same tradition. Particularly now that she discovered I was uninterested in their so-called truth, not sharing the expected witness activities, and basically kicked out of their midst. I was declared evil. Jehovah's Witnesses indirectly encouraged her to separate from that unbelieving husband, and she made sure that the children were well trained to hate the evil. Alas, I was part of that evil world. I will tell you more about it soon. Magda believed she was doing the right thing by keeping the children away from their evil father, alienating them against him. I also know that she was praised by her faithful brothers and sisters for doing so. However, being the youngest, Claude was so far the closest and friendliest. Even that was seen by Magda as dangerous, and whenever she saw me playing with my son, encouraging him to play the keyboards or put on a clown's nose for a photo shoot, as we had done before, she always had an excuse to call the child over just to keep him away from me, the evil one. I believe her dearest brothers and sisters encouraged her to do all that due to me being deservedly disfellowshipped. To tell you the truth, I was frightened about Jehovah's Witness elders having access to my children because of their reputation of child abuse, in their case, which they sweep under the carpet. I never wanted to believe this, but hearing so many stories like that would make any decent parent shiver. However, this never stirred Magda. We will also talk about this issue in a moment. I prefer to live a life of truthfulness and not a pretentious one, but regrettably I had been forced to lead a life of pretense for far too long. If she really knew what love was, she would understand me when I was finally able to tell her what I believed. If she still rejected me, I would know where I stood, knowing that she had never loved me in the first place. The witnesses she adored had to tell her how she should live. For a very long time, no opportunity was afforded to me to explain myself, for every attempt was taken as if I was joking. I was forced to hide myself behind the curtains of shame until then. But what was there to be ashamed of? When I started to speak the real truth, my worst nightmares were realized. It may not have been as painful for her as it was for me. Breaking away from my children was unthinkable, for they were my world. In truth, I had no one to turn to, whereas she had her faithful brothers, sisters, and leaders to listen to. Before things started getting out of hand, I tried to converse with her in an amicable way about my dilemmas with the witnesses. I had several questions about their teachings and things they believed in or expected to happen. I was never able to get a satisfactory answer, other than just being responded to with "Do not question the Spirit," or "Leave it to Jehovah, and he will teach you the right way of thinking." They were always vague in answering questions, and created the impression of unease when questioned, thus proving that they did not know the answers to what they were preaching, only pretending to be knowledgeable. They were, however, very good at condemning and judging others. Without discrimination for their lack, one could not have an intellectual conversation with any of them. My questions were responded to in the harshest way one can imagine. Instead of listening to me and responding as the wife I once adored, Magda treated me like those other witnesses did. She was certainly under their spell and strictest instructions. When she did respond to me, she preferred to open the pages of her Bible and quote from the supposed righteous advice given in the Scriptures. Obviously, she elected to treat me not as her husband and friend, but as God's enemy and the rejected one. Remember, she was only meant to speak the truth, and never judge me or anyone according to Jehovah's Witness wisdom. Due to my wife's intense adherence to supposed Bible principles, I feel the situation deserves a reasonably intense and analytical observation. Taking this into account, we discover by studying the characteristic teachings of the witnesses that apparently only God could judge, and divine wrath belonged to him alone, which the Holy Scripts appear to support in a Christian sense. Making sure that I did not sound as if I was judging her, I cautiously and gently spoke to Magda, but she always answered me angrily, shouting and reminding me that God loved those who obeyed His rules. I asked her why that same God had sent His only begotten Son to wipe off the sins of the world, and yet the world was full of people who did not obey the divine rules and regulations. She did not know how to answer, and could only reply saying that I was the evil one, and served my master, Satan, the devil. It was obvious that I was wasting my time by trying to explain anything. Remember, being completely under the influence and directives of her faithful brothers, everything for her had to be in black and white, and there was nothing in between. This is also a psychologically observable characteristic which many Jehovah's Witnesses portray. I did not think that there was anything left in common between us. I looked at the girl I once loved, but she was no longer there. She had been taken away and replaced by an unbelievably dogmatic Jehovah's Witness. Reluctantly, I had to accept my sentence as seen fit by the members of an archaic religious order. Those dogmatic teachings were to remain extremely limited and forever repetitious, keeping their adherents in complete bondage. People who were caught in their net were the only faithful ones whose future was determined. All of them apparently realized that there was a shortness of time before the wicked world ended, and they were ready to live forever in a new world without strife and enmity. It was God's will for Jesus to throw the old dragon, the devil, into the abyss for 1,000 years, and release him at the end of that period of time. If God's faithful servants still remained faithful until then, they were to be tested one final time, and when eligible, granted everlasting life. And the evildoers would be condemned to everlasting fire and brimstone into eternity, or just wiped off. Magda did not want to have a future like the evildoers, but rather as one of God's chosen. One can understand how fearful she became, for the end might happen any time now. Her motherly instincts kicking in, she had to save her children when the time was ripe. At this stage, she and the other witnesses were very keen to indoctrinate our 3 children well, so that they would hate every evil in the world, including their father, who questioned the Spirit. I became very aware of their freezing, cold attitude towards me as time advanced. Unfortunately, the indoctrination they were subjected to was destined to destroy their trust in me, forcing their love and trust towards me being completely eliminated, just to please their mother, thus leading them into becoming God's servants for the rest of their lives. I knew by then that I was not going to have them around me for very long. By observing their developing attitudes, I knew that they were capable of telling believable lies to their mother, for she was ever ready to hear all kinds of untruths about me. For example, casting evil spells. I felt devastated, sad, and totally lost. From then on, they had to remain faithful to their mother, whether she told them untruths or not, continually ready to deny the real truth as lies told by their father, without even realizing. I was certainly not wrong in assuming that this would prove to be correct, as you will discover later. I was hearing from other people talking of Magda's discoveries about me drifting deeper into devil worship with my behavior, my alleged belief in the dark forces, and many lies, veering away from the life-saving truth, listening to satanic advice. I was apparently questioning the spirit incessantly, for although everything like theft and child abuse could be forgiven, sinning against the spirit was unforgivable, and associating with the witches and spiritualists against Jehovah's will, according to their understanding of Bible wisdom, was like fornicating with the absolute evil. I was allegedly spending too much time singing evil Christmassy songs with those worldly people in pagan choirs, apart from lecturing evil and not God-approved subjects to the unfaithful worldly people at the university, instead of talking God's truths in the kingdom halls. And so I had hardly any time for my family and children. Hearing something like, "Dad, Mom told us if we go with you, God will punish us," was like having salt being poured in gaping wound, and most hurtful. I might sound like a broken record, repeating myself, but whenever I attempted to go to places like a restaurant or cinema with the children, she always had all kinds of excuses to keep them away from me for a very long time, saying she had promised to take them out herself, visiting her friends and probably going house to house with them. Whenever I asked them what they really wanted to do, they usually opted to go with their mother, but I believe it was out of the fear they were inflicted with. Rarely Annette wanted to come out with me. When home, she was immediately subjected to interrogation to tell her mother everything she did and ate, Magda often asking her if Dad taught her anything of the satanic kind, which I pretended not to hear. Sometimes Magda, not believing her, chose to punish her, breaking a wooden spoon or two on her rear. This treatment was geared to make the child never want to go with her father for fear of being punished. All truthful and God-loving Magda had to be the one who cared for them, and always spoke the truth. She was definitely making sure that I did not take them out for excessively evil and pagan practices like birthday celebrations or Christmas lunch. A long time ago, in our reasonably happier days, while sitting down and relaxing in the lounge, there was a big blowfly buzzing around. Then I jokingly told her I was going to direct my thoughts to that fly and will it to land on the wall. Then, while she was sipping her tea, I told her that it was going to disappear from the wall, and as she looked at the wall, it disappeared. In reality, it flew off. Then, for a joke, I told her that now I wanted the fly to reappear on the same spot. While she was taking another mouthful of her drink, the fly landed in the same spot. Seeing it, Magda shouted, "Yikes! How did you do that? Hope it's not magic." Later, she spoke all about it to her faithful brothers, and they in turn advised her that such magic acts were not approved of God, for they were evil. According to the children and other witnesses I spoke to, I had apparently practiced black art, and ever since, even when I was not home, seemingly things like furniture and cutlery occasionally moved on their own due to my being allegedly involved in magic. In short, I was accused by her and her faithful brothers of being engaged in black magic, and it was evil. I could not make her believe in anything I said. She had decided to reject me with my all, making me feel completely discarded from her life.